Death at Daisy's Folly, Chapter 2. At the end of November 1895, the Glasgow magistrates had refused the permission sought by a local umbrella manufacturer to run a petrol-powered delivery van in the streets. This anonymous tradesman reacted with gusto. Those in authority in our city, he declared, might as well try to beat back the waves of the sea with a broom as try to stem the tides of horseless carriages that are looming in the distance. T.R. Nicholson, The Birth of the British Motor Car. "I have a poser for you, old man," said the Honourable Bradford Marston, clutching the steering tiller in both hands. Sir Charles Sheridan smiled at his friend, who was manoeuvring his Daimler along the narrow road, trailing clouds of suffocating dust. Having suffered a mechanical breakdown beside the road the previous afternoon, to the manifest amusement of two labourers clearing a drain, Charles and Bradford had rolled up their sleeves and effected temporary repairs, then dispatched Lawrence, Marston's man, to London for the proper parts. They had slept the night at the Cock and Thorn in Braintree, breakfasted, then talked to themselves in goggles, motoring caps and poplin dusters, and resumed their journey to Easton Lodge, which lay on the further side of Great Dunmow, only a few miles away. "Your question would not concern His Highness's support for the Locomotives on Highways Bill, would it?" Charles asked lightly. Bradford grunted. "Dash it, old man, am I that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows your passions," Charles replied. "Since you've come back from that automobile exhibit at Tunbridge Wells, you've spoken of nothing else but promoting the motor car." While he and Bradford pursued quite different interests and did not see one another as often as they once had, they had been at Eton together and still remained close friends. "Passion be damned," Bradford growled. "This is bloody serious." The Daimler had overtaken a cyclist, a village parson garbed in a collar and long wool coat, who, gesticulating wildly, pedalled his safety bicycle off the road and upended it in a hawthorn hedgerow. Bradford hardly noticed. He was concentrating so intently on the steering. "You know as well as I do that if this country doesn't get off its arse and regain its prestige in industry, we are finished. Germany will see to that. The Kaiser is not above causing us mischief wherever he can, even if he is the Queen's grandson. The Prince is crucial in this matter. He must be brought to understand that the motor car represents the future of England." He coughed. "Let's make a stop, old man. This confounded dust is choking me. I need a drink of water." The future of England struggled noisily to the top of the rise, hiccuped, and lurched to a halt. As Bradford pulled a jug of water from beneath the seat and swigged at it, Charles raised his goggles and looked out across the gentle slopes of West Essex. The fields were painted in pleasing harvest hues of brown, greys, and gold, brightened by swathes of early morning sunlight. A group of village women, hempen sacks over their shoulder, were gleaning among the yellow stubble, while a placid herd of stocky Ayrshires and black and white Frisians grazed on the other side of the hedgerow, watched over by a herdsboy and his collie dog. Beyond lay the market town of Great Dunmow, its citizens going about their daily business in the narrow streets overhung with buildings built in the century of Henry VIII and Elizabeth. No alarms other than a noisy flight of rooks rising from a nearby tree stirred the pastoral peace of this rustic scene. No motor cars other than the one in which he sat broke the resonant silence. Since the advent of the railway in the earlier part of the century, heavier traffic had gone by train, leaving the roads to bicycles, horses, and foot travellers. Not even the whuffle and clank of an ox team intruded upon the quiet. The prosperous heart of England seemed to beat in these idyllic hills just as it had for centuries past. But Charles knew that at present the heart of London beat somewhere else. To the south and west lay London, the seat of international commerce. To the north rose the great grimy cities of Manchester, Birmingham, and Sheffield, built on iron and coal. The fields and meadows, villages and towns that had once been England's chief treasure no longer earned its livelihood. The cities were now the country's promise, were now its future. It was an all-industrial society that the nation would stand or fall. The motor car would certainly play its part in that. You don't believe me, eh? Bradford asked, misunderstanding Charles silent. You scientists have been too busy looking at beetles to see how fast Germany's star is rising and how fast ours is sinking. On the contrary, Charles replied, I spent several days at the Krupp's work in Essen this summer, studying the latest innovations in munitions. The Germans have moved far ahead of everyone else since the Franco-Prussian War. Their technological proficiency is quite amazing, actually. It makes one suspect that they are about to realize Jules Verne's fantasy of shooting a man to the moon. He paused and then added, Of course, there's the horrendous problem of acceleration, which Verne did not consider. No human being could withstand the forces involved in attaining the velocity necessary to escape. Ah, Bradford said hastily, with the air of a man bottling a genie. You do see. And didn't I hear you were down to Sandringham for the Princess's birthday for a fortnight ago? Perhaps I can prevail on you to put in a word with Q'Rajh about the bill, which has gotten lost in the melee of Rosebery's defeat. Salisbury and the Conservatives oppose it, of course. They are against anything that smacks of progress. But since the motor car exposition at Tunbridge Wells, popular interest has risen dramatically. A word from you, and the Prince might be persuaded to support. But I was at Sandringham on a photographic mission, Charles protested. Princess Alexandra had asked him to take pictures of the family gathering, and although he thought such assignments a waste of his time, he could hardly refuse what amounted to a royal command. He had, after all, been awarded a knighthood, to him a matter of minor importance, for his photograph of the Queen upon the occasion of her jubilee in '87. In any event, I don't have the ear of the Prince, he added. For that, Marston, you shall have to approach our hostess. That is the Countess's special privilege. The quiet was shattered as Bradford pushed the throttle and the Daimler launched itself down the hill toward Great Dunmow. Hearing the racket, the gleaners looked up with frightened faces, and pied cows raised their tails and galloped frantically to the far hedgerows. Charles pulled down his goggles, clung to the seat, and braced his feet against a bone-rattling plunge, thinking that something must be done to cushion the shock, or England's future would be too bumpy to ever endure. "The Countess, you say?" Bradford shouted above the clatter. "But Daisy has her own mission with the Prince, I understand. Isn't that why you brought along that photographic arsenal?" Charles waited until they had descended the hill and the clatter had somewhat subsided. "Lady Warwick, Daisy, told you her intention, then?" "No, she was very mysterious. She said only that she had arranged an excursion to Chelmsford for Q'Rajh, and that a motor car was wanted, which I am delighted to provide. She mentioned that you were coming along to take photographs. Knowing how little you fancy country house weekends, even the informal one she promised, I thought that might be the chief reason you agreed to come. That and the fact that Miss Ardley has been invited as well." In the distance a horse was approaching, pulling a dog cart. Bradford steered the Daimler well into the grassy verge and turned off the motor. Horses, as yet unaccustomed to motor cars, were apt to be skittish in their neighbourhood. In the sudden silence, Charles shifted uncomfortably. He had indeed looked forward to seeing Miss Ardley. Kate, she had asked him to call her. They had been acquainted now for over a year, an eventful year as it had turned out. Kate's circumstances had much changed since she arrived from America to work as secretary to her aunt at Bishop's Keep near the Marstons' country home in East Essex. Beautiful, if a bit headstrong and wilful, Kate had succeeded her aunt, now deceased, as mistress of the family manor. Charles had it in mind to marry her if she would have him. He had determined to lay the question before her this very weekend, a momentous determination for Charles, a man of otherwise rational intellect, who found his scientific pursuits quite engrossing enough, and had never before yielded to love for a woman. But Charles' romantic scheme had been turned upside down the day before yesterday, when he received the letter from his mother, the Dowager Baroness of Somersworth. Her news had filled him with a personal sorrow and the bleak realization that his life was about to change, not, in his opinion, for the better. He was summoned to do his duty. He could not now, after all, ask Kate for her hand. Loving her deeply as he did, and wishing nothing more than her complete happiness, he would not ask her to join him in a life he knew that she would despise. The mere thought of it filled Charles with great sorrow.